Hello and warm regards from Next Tires team. Welcome to another episode of Daily News Analysis. Today is 3rd September and the topics that we are going to discuss today include the first one is India's military exercises with US and Thailand, that is Yudh Abhyas and Maitri. The second topic is about the Public Accounts Committee and its directive to the telecommunication companies. The third topic is about the mental health report by the WHO. Then the fourth topic is about the Vikram 32-bit chip. And lastly, we are going to discuss about the gender disparity in judiciary, especially higher judiciary. The first topic is the military exercise with Abhyas and Maitri. Now, what is the backdrop? India and US says Yudh Abhyas and India and Thailand's exercise military are underway and both are scheduled for 1st to 14th September. Now, this topic becomes important from the prelims point of view, that is defense exercise of the Indian Army. Secondly, these exercises names can be used with respect to India-US relations and when we are discussing the India-Thailand relations or India-Southeast Asia relations. So let's go about the news. The news is that the India-Thailand joint military exercise known as the Exercise Maitri 14th edition is underway in Meghalaya. Secondly, India and American troops have begun the 21st edition of the exercise Yudh Abhyas at Fort Wainwright in Alaska from 1st to 14th September 2024. Now let's see what kind of questions have been asked from this particular area. So this is a question in front of you that has come in UPSC 2024. So it was about the exercise Mitra Shakti 2023. So based upon this, the further questions can be asked upon the exercises that we are going to discuss. Let's move to the main part now. The main part, first of all, we are discussing about the exercise Yudh Abhyas. This exercise is a bilateral exercise between India and US Army and it is conducted on annual basis alternatively in each country. Last year it was in India, now this year it is in USA. The focus areas involve counter-terrorism operation, peacekeeping under US mandate, then UN mandate, then humanitarian assistance and disaster relief, and lastly about the high altitude and extreme cold warfare. So this extreme cold warfare, it is already being conducted in Alaska. Now, activities, what are the activities that are involved? It is joint training, tactical drills, field training, exercise and command post exercise. It enhances the interoperability, coordination and defense partnership between two countries. And now this 24th edition of the Yudh Abhyas 2025, it is being done in the ambit, or you can say in the backdrop, that there are US tariffs that has been imposed on India. Now, heavy tariffs have been imposed, and India has shown its closeness with USA, with Russia and China. In this backdrop itself, the India-US exercise is going on smoothly. This shows that the economic relations of the two nations have not impacted the defense collaboration of these two nations. It is having a much deeper understanding than the economic part. Now, if we see for the 21st edition, the venue is Fort Wainwright of Alaska and the time period is 1 to 14th September 2025. The Indian contingent is Madras Regiment and from the USA side it is the 1st Battalion 5th Infantry Regiment Bobcats Arctic Wolves Brigade 11th Airborne Division. It will focus on the tactical drills, heliborne operations, UAS and counter-UAS, mountain warfare, casualty evacuation, combat medical aid, electronic warfare, artillery and aviation integration. Also, it will enhance their interoperability in US peacekeeping and multi-domain warfare. Next thing is that what are India and US relations? So, if we see the joint US-India Declaration on Defense Cooperation of 2013 actually paved way or foundation for the expanding ties of India and USA. In 2015, India and USA had a framework for US-India defense relationship. The framework was adopted in 2015. It strengthened the long-term defense cooperation. Now, after this framework, we had the foundational defense agreements between India and USA. So basically, the 2016 LIMOA, that is Logistic Exchange Memorandum of Agreement, second 2018 COMCASA, Communication, Compatibility and Security Agreement. Third one is 2020 BECA, Basic Exchange and Cooperation Agreement, that is Geospatial Cooperation. These all have been signed between India and USA. And most recently in 2024, we had the Security of Supply Arrangement and MOA on liaison officers, deepening the operational coordination between the two countries. So this shows that India and USA defense ties are much deeper than and do not have the economic relationship impact upon it. Now next is that India is also taking heavy defense procurement from US side. For example, the major acquisitions involve MH-60R Seahawks, 6 Saucer rifles, and M777 howitzers. Then ongoing projects include manufacture of GE4 F414 jet engines for India's LCA Mark II, Light Compact Aircraft Mark II. Then the delivery of GE4 F4 engines has already been done, and it is used for Tejas Mk Mark 1A. Then the procurement of 31 MQNB HALE UAVs is also under consideration. UAVs are unmanned aerial vehicles. Then strategic significance. Strategic significance shows that defense ties remain steady despite the trade friction. This is important for us. And this statement can be used in any question relating with India and US relationship. It symbolizes a growing strategic partnership on security in the Indo-Pacific region. And in this context, Quad becomes important for us. Now next is the exercise Maitri 14. The Maitri 14 exercise is being conducted between India and Thailand. The venue here is Meghalaya. This is a joint training node in Umroi. Now the duration will be 1st to 14th September. This particular exercise, that is exercise Maitri, was initiated in 2006, and the objective was to enhance the military cooperation, interoperability and mutual understanding between the two armies. This exercise Maitri 14 focuses on strengthening the joint counter-terrorism capabilities in the semi-urban settings. Now next thing is that who are going to participate. So from Indian Army, the Madras Regiment is going to participate. From the Thailand, it is the Royal Thai Army 1st Infantry Battalion 14th Infantry Brigade is going to participate. The 13th edition, that is the last year's edition, was held in Thailand, and before that the edition happened in 2019 only. So after 2019 the next exercise was in 2024, and now this year it is the 14th exercise. This significance is it strengthens the bilateral defense ties as well as reinforces commitment to regional peace, stability and security. Now, what are the other important exercises that are conducted between India and other countries? So, few important ones are there. Already these two we have covered. One is Vajra Prahar, it is between India and USA, and it is only for the special forces. Then Nomadic Elephant, India and Mongolia. Hand in Hand, India and China. Sampriti, India and Bangladesh. Mitra Shakti, India and Sri Lanka. Shakti between India and France. Then Indra, India and Russia. Indra से नाम याद हो जाएगा. IN for India, IND for India, and RA for Russia. Just to make you remember it. Then Khanjar, India and Khanjar is India and Kyrgyzstan. Garud Shakti, India and Indonesia. Ikuverin, India and Maldives. Then Surya Kiran, India and Nepal. So you can just relate it. There is Mount Everest. Between that the sun is rising. So Surya Kiran between India and Nepal. Then Al Naga, India and Oman. Harimau Shakti, India and Malaysia. And Dastalik, India and Uzbekistan. So these are the important exercises by the Indian military or Indian Army. Now next is your turn to attempt this MCQ and post your answers in the comment box. And let's move to the second topic. The second topic that we are having is about from the polity section, that is the Public Accounts Committee. Now the news is very simple one, but here we are exploring about what is this Public Accounts Committee so that you know what is its role in the parliamentary democracy. The backdrop is that the Parliament panel seeks better rural mobile services, and it is important for the digital divide that is in India. To fill that digital divide, it is very important that we should have rural mobile connectivity. Then relevance, that is GS paper 2, Parliament and state legislatures, structure, functioning, conduct of business, powers, privileges and issues arising of this. And this is in the context of Public Accounts Committee. Now let's see what is the news here. There are basically 4 important telecommunication companies in India: Airtel, Jio, Vodafone and BSNL. All these have been directed by this Public Accounts Committee that they should provide details of the number of mobile towers installed in the rural, border, and hill districts. Now, how the Public Accounts Committee is able to do this? Because these are all, these three are private entities, and this is a PSU. Because they are using the national resources of airwaves. So that's why they become accountable to the PAC. So how they are functioning. Now, it has been observed by the PACO Public Account Committee that the connectivity is so poor in villages and on the Indio-Nepal border that many residents have opted for Nepalese network, which was set by one of the members. The four service providers were asked by the panel to take more care to expand their network in such remote areas. The members also flagged the lukewarm progress made by the National Broadband Mission. The second phase of mission began in April this year, and the response has not been very encouraging. Now, next we move to what are the questions that have been asked from this particular area or this particular body. So, in 2017, from GS Paper 2, a direct question was asked: discuss the role of Public Account Committee in establishing accountability of government to the people. So, you need to discuss the role of PAC. Here, you need to tell what are the responsibilities that has been given to PAC, what are the powers it has been given, and what are the lacunae or criticism regarding its role, so that your answer becomes complete. So basically, you have to discuss the role and responsibility as well as the problems or the concerns regarding the functioning and effectiveness of PAC. Let's move to the Public Account Committee. Now, Public Account Committee is a parliamentary committee, and it is one of the three financial committees of the Parliament. The three financial committees involve the Public Account Committee, the Estimates Committee, and the Committee on Public Undertakings. Public Account Committee is the biggest of all the three committees. It has a total member of 22. First, it was formed in 1921 through the Government of India Act of 1919. I hope you would have remembering the Montego Camford's reform that happened in 2019, and according to that, this particular committee was formed. Earlier, the chairman of the committee was Finance Minister. Until the constitution came into force, the Finance Minister used to head this committee. But after that, it was observed that the Finance Minister is going to head the committee. Then who is going to hold the Finance Minister accountable? Because the Finance Ministry is the one which is creating the budget, which is actually giving the budget. So that's why the Finance Minister or any minister cannot be a member of Public Account Committee. Public Account Committee will consist of the members of the Parliament from both Lok Sabha as well as Rajya Sabha, but any of the minister cannot be member of it. This committee is constituted annually on the basis of Rule 308 of Lok Sabha rules. So this is the committee that comes under Lok Sabha. Next is the constitution of the Public Account Committee. The Public Account Committee constitutes of 22 members. 15 members comes from Lok Sabha and 7 members come from Rajya Sabha. Now, these members are selected on the basis of single transferable vote, and there is a proportional representation. The proportional representation means the party having more members in the Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha is going to have more representation in this Public Account Committee, and it is a very important committee. Secondly, the chairman will be appointed by the speaker and from the members who have been elected through the single transferable vote. The tenure will be 1 year, and minister cannot be member of this Public Account Committee. Last thing is that the chairman through convention that was established in 1967 comes from the opposition. He cannot be member of the party which is in power. So whoever are members of the opposition and have been elected to this Public Account Committee can become the chairman. Next thing is, what does it do? CAG brings 3 audit reports. The first one is audit report on appropriation of accounts. Second is audit report on Public Accounts Committee, public undertakings, and third is audit report on financial accounts. So this Public Account Committee actually studies this appropriation accounts and financial accounts audit report, and based upon that it scrutinizes the Parliament. For the public undertakings, there is a separate committee which takes care of the accounts of the public undertakings. Now, the PSC examines the appropriation account of Government of India and the financial account and other accounts laid before the Parliament. It reviews the accounts of state corporations, trading concerns, and manufacturing projects, autonomous and semi-autonomous bodies. For example, the autonomous body can be ISRO. So those accounts will be constituted by the Public Account Committee. Bodies and government projects. It ensures expenditure is legally available and authorized. Secondly, expenditure conforms to the rules and provisions of the House. Third is reappropriation is as per the rule. Also, it checks the excess expenditure, saving due to wrong estimates and cause of loss of waste. So all these things are taken care of by the Parliamentary Account Committee. Then what is the nature of the examination? The nature of the examination is not like that they have just saw that what is the accounts are proper or not. They also test the wisdom, faithfulness, and economy of the expenditure. It scrutinizes the cases of irregularities, negligence, or extravagance, and CAG is termed as the friend, philosopher, and guide to PAC. So CAG actually guides Public Account Committee that what is the account, where are the problems. So basically, Public Account Committee's well working depends upon the effectiveness of the CAG. Next is after the scrutinization, how the actions are taken up and how the follow up is being done. So the government must reply within 6 months on the PACs or Public Account Committee's recommendations that have been given. Secondly, it can also examine the action taken report by the government and can present follow-up reports. Since 1982, it also reviewed the corrective measures on audit or paragraphs not taken up for detailed examination. So these are the basic rules of PAC. Now next is what is the significance of PAC. So first of all, it acts as the watchdog for public finances. It sees that government is not doing wasteful expenditure. It sees that the expenditure is done in the right manner and in the right direction. Second, it ensures parliamentary control over the public expenditure because the PAC committee's report is being put to parliament and the whole parliament discusses that report. It strengthens transparency, accountability, and fiscal discipline in the governance, and by ensuring transparency, it also helps in developing public trust over the government. It helps curb extravagance, irregularities, and mismanagement of the public funds. So basically, public funds को बचा के रखना कि वो सही से use हो रहे हैं, सही से उनका expenditure हो रहा है, that is the responsibility of Public Accounts Committee. That's why its rules become important. And based upon this only, the UPSC question of 2017 was asked. Now you have to attempt this MCQ and post your answers in the comment box, and let's move to the next topic. The next topic is about the mental health. Now what is the backdrop here? The backdrop is that WHO has released a report. It says over 1 million people are living with mental health condition globally. It should be 1 billion. 1 billion people are living with mental health condition globally. Now, how it is relevant? First of all, in the society part, population and associated issues, you can relate that. This particular article can be used. The points from here can be used there. Secondly, GS paper 2 also. Issues related to development and management of social sector services related to health, education, and human resource. Now, next is about the news. The about the news is that the World Health Organization has released 2 reports. One is World Mental Health Today and Mental Health Atlas 2024. Now, it says that WHO is going to release country-wise profiles as the part of Mental Health Atlas, and it will be the first after the COVID and the factors that have after effects of the COVID. So, based upon that, the report is going to come out. Now, next is what is mental health. So, according to the definition of the WHO, the mental health is the state of mental well-being that enables people to cope up with the stress of life, realize their abilities, learn well and work well, and contribute to their community. So this is a definition given by the WHO with respect to mental health. This you can note down. Now next thing is WHO's finding in this global mental health report. It says that over 1 billion people are living with mental health disorders worldwide. The world's population is around 7 billion. And out of that, 1 billion are facing mental health issues. It is leading to suicide. That's why suicides are increasing and is becoming the leading cause of death among the young people globally. So now more young people are committing suicides, and this is the major cause of deaths of the young people. 1 in every 100 deaths is due to suicide. In 2021 itself, 727 million people died by suicide, and over attempts per death 20 attempts per death have been done. The anxiety and depressive disorders are making up two-thirds of all the cases. Global prevalence of mental disorder has risen to 13.6% in 2021 from it is up to 0.9% from 2011. Then 20 to 29 year age group saw the largest increase. That means the youth is facing problems of anxiety, depression, and suicidal thoughts more than the other groups. And this is very, very alarming. And it is alarming for India also, because India's major population is below 35 years. And in India also, we are seeing a number of suicide cases are happening. And basically, the school going children, the students who are preparing for competitive exams, they are going for these things. They are having suicidal thoughts. They are undergoing through the depression. So we need to take care of that. Next is that depressive disorders become more common after 40 years, peaking between 50 to 69 years. Then with respect to male and female, different kind of mental health problems are being related. For example, for the males, attention deficit, hyperactivity disorder, autism, idiopathic disorder of intellectual development are being seen. With respect to females or women, anxiety, depression, eating disorders are being seen. So these kind of disorders are visible in our males and female populations. The next is what does sustainable development goals relate with it? So sustainable development goal number 3 ensures healthy lives and promote well-being for all ages. The SDG target 3.4 says non-communicable disease and mental health. The target is that by 2030 we have to reduce 1/3 premature mortality from non-communicable diseases through prevention and treatment, and we need to promote the mental health and well-being. So one thing that you need to remember is that goal number 3 relates with mental health. Secondly, the target is we need to go for 1/3 reduction in the premature deaths. The current trend that is going on, it is seen that this particular target is not achievable. We will be only able to achieve 12% of the reduction, and we need to achieve a reduction of 33%. So it is seeing very, very improbable, the things that are going right now, that we will be able to achieve this target. Next is WHO is stressing for a need for a sustained funding, leadership, and implementation to achieve the SDG 3.4 target. Next is, what is the impact of poor health? The poor health impacts the productivity, economically, as well as it has social and emotional well-being impact. So it impacts our productivity, it impacts our economic well-being, and also it impacts the social and emotional well-being of the people. Productivity, for example, a person who is under mental stress will have lower workplace performance, will show increased absenteeism, and the efficiency will be reduced. So mentally alert, mental well-being is very, very important for a very high productivity. Second is social and emotional well-being. If a person is going through mental problems, then it will affect his interpersonal relationships, self-confidence, and also the social interactions, which is going to create more anxiety in the person. Lastly, the economic impact of bad mental health. It will increase the burden of the diseases. It will lead to the untreated conditions can lead to higher economic cost as well. So this is going to the basic impact of the poor mental health. Next, what are the key challenges in India's mental health? So the key challenges involve, the first of all is the inadequate infrastructure. We are not having sufficient psychiatric beds and in general and tertiary hospitals. So for that, what we can do is that we can shift custodial care to therapeutic and community-based care. Secondly, tertiary hospitals can also serve as academic training hubs. Second is poor funding condition. Psychiatric hospitals often face neglect, abuse, and poor living conditions. The limited government investment in mental health care is responsible for these things. Then inadequate insurance coverage is also there. The insurance coverage is also not very much increasing for the mental health diseases, which leads to limited or absent insurance of the mental health care, restricts treatment access. It ensuring sufficient and affordable insurance coverage is vital for better law enforcement and care delivery. Then severe shortage of professionals. Lack of psychiatrists, psychologists, nurses, counselors, and social workers is very much seen. The rural and interior regions are not having sufficient, or you can say are having no access to specialists. They have to come to the urban areas. Then medicines are often also not available. The cost and distance prevent families from seeking a professional help. The next, the stigma around the mental health, because there's a deep rooted stigma preventing people from seeking help and limits acceptance of the mental health laws. Then mental health is often treated as a less important than the physical health. Next is the weak chain of care. Patient need continuity of treatment, regular medicines, and financial support. Limited research capacity. Lack of adequate research hinders effective policy and implementation strategies. More studies are needed to identify best practice for enforcing mental health legislations. Now, next is what are the steps that Indian government has taken. First of all, from the institutional and infrastructure point of view, 25 centers of excellence in 2024 have been opened for training PG students and advanced treatment. 47 PG departments in 19 medical colleges have been upgraded or established. Then mental health services have been introduced in 22 new AIIMS. Then 47 government-run mental hospitals, including 3 central institutions, have been created. The National Institute of Mental Health and Neurosciences in Bengaluru is regarded as the institution of national importance. LGB RIMH in Tezpur, Assam, then CIP in Rajasthan. Next is, we are now integrating the mental health with the primary health care. For example, under Ayushman Bharat HWCs, 1.73 lakh SHCs and PSCs were upgraded at Ayushman Arogya Mandirs. Mental health is now included in the comprehensive primary health care package. The policies and legal framework. The National Mental Health Program of 1982 it says for community-based care through district mental health program and is operational in 767 districts. Then Right of Persons with Disabilities Act of 2016 included mental health illness in disability definition aligned with the UNCRPD. Then Mental Health Act of 2014 was enacted to overcome the provisions of the archaic law and to modernize it in accordance with the present situation. The right to affordable mental health care, decriminalization of suicide have now been included as the legal provisions. Lastly, National Health Policy 2017, it was released. It prioritizes the mental health integration into the PSCs and HWCs. Next is digital training and initiative. For that, I got Diksha Platform 2020. Training of the doctors, nurses, and frontline workers in the mental health care is being conducted. Then there is a National Tele Mental Health Program known as Tele Manas 2022. It provides 24/7 mental health support. So anytime a person needs any mental care and expert advice, he can directly call on this Tele Manas. The Kiran helpline has also been integrated into this Tele Manas. Then suicide prevention strategy has also been devised. National Suicide Prevention Strategy 2022, it targets to reduce the suicide by 10% by 2030. And the works that is going the strategy that is going to employ is that, first of all, mental health screening in schools and colleges, crisis helpline and support centers, workplace mental health programs, and it will focus on the vulnerable groups like students, farmers, and youth, because here we are seeing more number of suicide cases. Now, it's your turn. Attempt this MCQ and post your answers in the comment box, and let's move to the fourth topic. Let's move to the fourth topic, that is Vikram 32-bit chip. It is the India's first indigenous chip that India has developed. Now, what is the backdrop here? The backdrop is that PM Modi receives the first made in India Vikram 32-bit chip. The relevance is from basically GS3, achievements of Indians in science and technology, the indigenization of technology, and developing new technology. So direct topic it is coming. Next is about the news. The news is that Union IT Minister Ashwini Vaishnav presented Prime Minister Narendra Modi with the Made in India Vikram 32-bit processor launch vehicle grade chip at Semicon India 2025, that is now currently going on September 2 to 2025. Now, what is this Vikram 3201 microprocessor? Vikram 32-bit processor launch vehicle grade chip. It is a fully made in India, make in India 32-bit microprocessor for space launch vehicles. It is being designed and developed by the Vikram Sarabhai Space Center of ISRO and Semiconductor Laboratory in Chandigarh. It is specially developed for space flight applications. It is primary for space missions but is suited for defense, automotive and energy systems. So basically we have designed it for the space application, but it will find its application in the defense, missiles, automotives, the movement and energy systems also. Next is, this is the picture of this 32-bit chip. Next is the key features and significance of it. So it is designed for navigation, guidance, control and mission management in ISRO's launch vehicles. It handles split-second trajectory and stability calculations critical for rocket success. So it is very much applicable in the defense sector, the aircrafts as well as the missiles. Next, it is built to withstand harsh space environment, extreme heat, cold vibrations and radiations. The evolution, how it has evolved. It has evolved from the Vikram 1601, which is a 16-bit processor used in 2019 ISRO launch vehicles. Vikram 3201 is an upgrade of that previous chip. It has a 32-bit architecture, high data handling and precision, 64-bit floating point operations for accurate trajectory computation. Trajectory means the line in which the rocket or missile is going. Then ADA program language support used for aerospace grade software. Then on-chip 1553B communication bus interface for seamless avionic integration. It is fabricated using 180 nanometer CMOS technology, aerospace proven reliable for long-term missions. Then testing and validation. In orbit validation of PSLV C60 POEM-4 mission, it successfully powered the mission management computer. So it has already been tested, and the first production lot was handed to ISRO on 5th March 2025 by MITI and SCL. It has an indigenous ecosystem, which means that the complete software tool chain has been developed by the ISRO. The ADA compilers, assemblers, links, simulators, integrated development environment. C compiler under development to enhance the programming flexibility. It simply means that the problem that we were facing with Rafale, that the core software was not given to us. So we were not able to integrate our indigenous missile in the Rafale system, or we need France support to integrate them. When we are having an indigenous ecosystem, then we can simply do that because we know what is the core software there. So the whole software chain has been developed by us only. Then strategic importance. It represents fully make in India space grade microprocessor. Then reduces dependence on imported space grade processors. It increases resilience against supply chain disruptions and export restrictions. Now next is India's semiconductor sector promotion. For that, India is targeting a 1 trillion semiconductor market. 5 semiconductor units are already operational, pilot line of 1 unit already completed, 2 more units expected to begin production within months, and other units will be established later on. Next is, what are the schemes with respect to the semiconductors that India is having. So basically we are going to see the overview of that. India Semiconductor Mission 2021, nodal agency to drive semiconductor and display ecosystem. Then Semicon India Program 2021, 76,000 crore outlay, fiscal support to 50% for fabs, ATMP, OSET units, complete semiconductor display fabs. Then Design Linked Incentive Scheme 2021, incentive for domestic chip design, IP development, support startup and MSMEs. Then Production Linked Incentive Scheme for large scale electronics manufacturing. It will boost mobile and component manufacturing, create demand for the chips. Then Electronic Manufacturing Cluster 2.0 scheme that was launched in 2020, basically for infrastructure of electronics and semiconductor units. So if any question comes based upon the semiconductor or India's efforts, these particular schemes can be quoted there. Now next we are having the policies. One policy, that is National Policy on Electronics 2019. It targets $4 billion electronics production by 2025. So we are already in 2025 and we need to see how much it has achieved. Then Modified Program for Semiconductors and Display Fab Ecosystem 2022. It provides 50% fiscal support across all semiconductor nodes and display technologies. And lastly, National Electronics Policy Measure under Digital India. It integrates semiconductors with AI, IoT, 5G applications. Next is the objective question that you need to attempt. So attempt this MCQ and post your answers in the comment box. And then we move to the fifth topic, that is the decoded part. The topic is gender disparity in judiciary. Now this topic we are discussing with respect to Supreme Court, because in Supreme Court there has been appointment of new judges and it is being seen as a missed opportunity where we could have appointed more women judges. Now in this backdrop, India needs more women judges in the Supreme Court, and this topic becomes relevant from gender empowerment. You can relate it with judiciary as well as society of chapter of GS paper 1. Now what is the news here? The news is that while Justice Sudhanshu Dhulia retirement, 2 vacancies were opened for Supreme Court, and it is being seen that 2 more women judges could have been appointed. Now it was not done. If we see historically, only 11 women judges have been appointed so far in Supreme Court. The first appointed woman judge was Justice Fatima Bibi in 1989. Until now, no female CJI has been there. The first woman CJI that we are going to have will be Justice B.V. Nagarthana, and she will be CJI only for 36 days. So this shows that the representation of women in judiciary is not very much increasing. Now, what are the issues? The issues in representation involve, the first one is diversity gaps. What is diversity gap? Already the number of women judges women judges have been very low. There have been 11 so far. In those 11 also, there have been no women judges who from the scheduled caste and scheduled tribe community. Only one judge have come from the minority community, that is Justice Fatima Bibi. So there is a diversity gap. Second is this token representation. There have so far been 11 women judges, and the maximum strength of women judges that have reached is up to 3 only. So more or less, this is a token representation that we need to have one woman judge, we need to have at least one woman judge. That's why the one woman judge is there. Now currently, out of 34 judges, only one woman judge is there, or one female judge is there. Others are male. Next is the issue in appointment with respect to direct appointments. Till now, 9 judges have been directly elevated from the bar. And out of that, only one woman judge have been elevated directly from the bar. That is, initially she was an advocate and then she became a judge. That was Justice Indu Malhotra. So it is somehow creating a glass ceiling for the woman in the higher judiciary itself. Next is the short tenures. The short tenures of the woman judge, as we have seen, there is sometimes 3 years, sometimes 4 years. There have been no CJI till now who is a female. The first female CJI will be Justice Nagarthana, and she will be only for 36 days. She will be appointed as the CJI on September 24, 2027 and will retire on October 29, 2027. Next is, what are the structural problems with respect to the with respect to representation of women in higher judiciary. The first one is opaque collegium system. The appointments, lack of transparency, criteria like caste, religion, and religion sometimes considered, but gender is never institutionalized. That means gender part is never considered for the appointment part. Secondly, the inconsistent collegium disclosure. Sometimes CJIs have published reasons for the appointments and others have not. Next is the lack of policy mandate. No written requirement for gender representation is in constitutional code. So there should be a proper mandate that we need women judges in our constitutional courts, in our higher judiciary. Next is, what are the challenges of women representation in judiciary itself, if we see at the overall level. The first one is the barrier at the entry level. Although we are having a 50% reservation of women that is being implemented by many states in the judiciary, but there are certain minimum period of continuous practice norms that is under judicial services rule. which does not allow women to complete the basic requirement. And that is why, that is the due to the basic reason, because they have family responsibilities and they are without adequate support. So for them, this minimum period of continuous practice should be actually in accordance to their requirement. Next is retention issue. Lack of maternity benefits, stipends, and child care facilities hinder women's career progression. Women environment often fails to address women's specific needs. The course environment. Then vicious cycle of underrepresentation. Few women in senior positions lack mentors and role models because we are having very less number of women judges. It reinforces the male dominated culture, making it harder to break the glass ceiling. Next, other structural barriers. Gender stereotypes, social attitudes, and weak infrastructure also discourage women in women's role in the judiciary. Then why women judges matter? Underrepresentation of women often results in patriarchal biases in the judgment. For example, recently Allahabad High Court ruling downplayed the sexual violence leading to Supreme Court's intervention. In past also, Kozhikode Bombay High Court 2022 also revealed gender insensitive reasoning and reinforcing the stereotypes. So we need to have more representation of women so that we can counter this patriarchal bias. Then broader perspective required. Why? Because women brings distinct personal and professional experience to the judicial reasoning. Trust and confidence. Representation enhances the legitimacy and inclusivity of the court. The next is substantive equality. It ensures that court reflects the diversity of Indian society. Then to improve the gender representation at the higher judiciary, institutionalize the gender as a criteria in judicial appointments alongside caste, religion, and region. Formulate a written diversity and inclusion policy for the higher judiciary. Then promote direct elevation of women from bars and ensure timely appointment to give them longer tenure. Recognize that gender representation is not symbolic but crucial for strengthening democracy and justice delivery. And lastly, supportive measures like flexible working hours and parental care, mentorship and skill development programs, gender bias sensitization, and infrastructure improvement, these things also need to be done. Now, with this, we conclude for the day. You have this mains answer, you write this answer, bring this to us, and we are going to give you the feedback. So, with this, we conclude for the day. Thank you very much and have a nice day.